Blockchain, it's a great governance system. If you think about it, the rules are very transparent and because they're put as code in code. Yeah, the enforcement is automatic. There will never be any disputes because it's binary, yes or no. So there's no room for disputes, but it's very limiting that way too.
How early and how too early actually we are for AI to be incorporated into blockchain.
I don't think you're ever going to get a blockchain replacing the judiciary, as an example.
The FinancialFox has just launched Bitcoin Foxes, our special ordinal collection of 5,000 super sophisticated female foxes. These are not just collectible NFTs, but they are actually inscribed on the Bitcoin blockchain. So grab your fox to be part of our community promoting female empowerment and leadership. If you don't know how to get started, check out the links in the description and don't be afraid to reach out to me. I'll see you there.
Today on the FinancialFox, we are going to dive deep into a topic that is quite challenging, which is the future of democracy in a decentralized world. Well, many times I've been asked, is it really possible to code every aspect of our life, society, and the government infrastructure? Well, maybe or maybe not, because humans, they play quite an interesting role in actually creating all of these infrastructure around us, and our society is actually a product of our decision. So how we can actually get the code to do everything for us in a way that can also fit into our evolution, into our subjective decision. It's a very interesting topic, and today I hope that I can find some interesting answers to share with you with my guest, Claire Cummings. She's a British female leading voices in the digital asset space, a solicitor specialized in crypto law and also the evolving regulation, and Nicolas Biagosh, co-initiator of HIVE Blockchain. Now, before we go into the show, a couple of things. If you are watching our videos and listening at our podcast on Spotify, but you are not yet part of the FinancialFox community, I'm going to ask you a favor. Click the subscribe button on YouTube and Spotify, and also follow us on social media, not only to stay up to date with our news and interviews, but also to support our podcast, share the content, and also give us feedback, which I love. You can send me an email at steffi@financialfox.news, or you can DM us on social media, or even leave a comment in the YouTube comment section of the videos. And finally, a quick word about our partner and sponsor, HIVE Digital Technologies.
FinancialFox is proud to partner with HIVE Digital Technology, a public listed company focusing on building the green energy infrastructure for the AI revolution. HIVE was the first crypto miner to go public in Canada in 2017. They are also listed on Nasdaq and the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. They hodl, and they are a leader in efficient Bitcoin mining with the best hash rate realization in the industry. They are operational, powered by green energy, hydropower in Sweden and Canada, and geothermal in Ireland. HIVE was also the first crypto miner to buy GPUs, chips, and have an AI strategy. And that's very exciting considering the AI data center are such a high profitable business. Finally, and most importantly, HIVE care about shareholders. That's why their strategy is low dilution, low G&A, and focus on cash flow. If you don't know HIVE, check them out at hivedigitaltechnology.com and follow them on social media. Remember, AI is the future and Bitcoin is rising as a new asset class. Some analysts have a target price above $100,000 for 2024, but let's see. For now, we hodl, and don't forget to check out HIVE. More information in the description.
Hi Claire, Nicolas, how are you?
Hi, I'm very well, thank you.
So, today is going to be quite interesting because we are actually going to dive deep into some topics that usually, the people in the crypto digital asset space, they don't usually talk about it, but they are equally important especially when we think about our society, we think about government, we think also about what blockchain and decentralization bring to the space. But before we get into that, let's just take a minute for a quick introduction. And I'm going to ask Nicola to start, because Nicola, I've got a question for you. I want to understand why you call yourself co-initiator of Q rather than co-founder.
That's a good question. Thank you for that. So first of all, thanks for having me here. I'm super excited. Great to meet you, Claire. And so the reason for this is Q is a decentralized system. So I am not a founder in that I didn't found a company. There's no company. Martin, another co-initiator, and Andre, who's more on the tech side, we came together. We came up with the concept. We involved others, and then eventually initiated a foundation, a non-for-profit foundation, regulated in Liechtenstein, where all of the initial seed money was donated into. And they then initiated the project. And I'm helping, so I'm not even part of that foundation. I don't own company shares because there is no company. And I think it's oftentimes misleading that if we're talking about decentralized organizations in the space and then we have a founder. So we wanted to make it very clear that I'm not a founder. I don't own company shares and then sell it to others. I don't have a specific say. It's like I can't even decide about the budget without a broader decision of the parts of the community. I'm not part of that foundation, and that's our way of trying to cater to an as decentralized system as possible. And then, of course, decentralization happens over time. You always have some kind of central beginning, and then you decentralize over time. Which, by the way, was also one of the reasons we received regulatory clearance in Liechtenstein, where they literally looked at every aspect, and they were especially interested in understanding who's calling the shots, who's able to vote for money, who's able to decide how the money is going to be spent, or what happens to the code. And only when they found out that, for example, we don't have any admin keys to do code upgrades and these kind of things, it's all vote based and it's all community based. That's when we received regulatory clearance.
Okay, super interesting. So Claire, do you want to go next?
Yes, let me introduce myself. Thank you. My name is Claire Cummings, and I'm the CEO and founder of a think tank here in London called the Centre for Digital Assets and Democracy. And our work is very much based on the idea that digital assets can enhance democracy. They can be used to ensure that we have freedom over our own assets, we have freedom of transaction, and we have privacy with what we do as well. However, there is a flip side to this, the ugly side of the same coin, which is that there's also potential for the state to use our financial activity to surveil us, which to my mind is an absolute inversion of the basis of democracy, which is that the elected answer to the electorate rather than the other way around. The state should not be surveilling the citizens should be actually surveilling those whom we elect. So we're very much in the business of promoting the good of digital assets and also educating on the potential harm of that. I'm very pleased to say that we've just had some quite significant funding from a quite significant name to help with our work over initially the next 12 months. And we're going to be looking in more detail at Bitcoin for liberty, the dangers of CBDCs in state hands, but actually how that kind of the equivalent type of transaction could work well when it's in a business-to-business concept for frictionless transaction and de-risking financial transactions. And we're also looking at how actually Bitcoin mining can, and in many cases is, environmentally friendly, plus it creates jobs. But there's no point in having Bitcoin. There's no point in having an asset if you haven't got a market for it. So we're also looking at how the opening up of Bitcoin with the introduction of ETFs in the US is potentially a stabilizing and democratizing force for Bitcoin, and why it is that we can't have an ETF in the UK, because it is regulated, because it's on an exchange. So forgive me if I've got a bit too far on that, but I'd also say that as a lawyer, and I'm also the managing partner of Cummings Pepperdine, as a law firm, we do underpin everything with law and regulation. So it's the theory plus the fact.
Super interesting. So let's dive deep into the topic today, right? Let's set the scene. So when we talk about decentralized democracy, how is different from a traditional democratic model? What do we mean with decentralized democracy, and what are the fundamental principles behind it?
Could I make a start by maybe, if I talk about sort of what my thoughts on true democracy are, and Nicolas, you're the king of decentralized thinking, so maybe we could do a double act on this one. So first of all, what is democracy? Well, where do you start? Where do you end? We have summarized it at the Centre for Digital Assets and Democracy quite simply as the elected are responsible to the electorate. And that includes, amongst their duty of care, is to ensure and enhance our ability to live free lives within a certain rule of law, within a democracy. But you don't have a democracy unless those who are elected realise what their democratic duties to those who elect them are.
No, absolutely. And I would maybe take that a step further into the digital world. So we've seen how that has become an ever-increasing space of human activity and economic activity. And we've seen that grow way past nation states and regions. So our project has people from like 20 different nationalities and jurisdictions in it, and combining that. So if you look at these circumstances, the answer to where a project in the digital space should reside is more often than not wrong. It's like if you have a truly international digital project that is independent of any region, you can't have it reside in the US under US jurisdiction or in China, because the answer is always wrong.
Yeah, so for example, borderless, there's no company behind it, a bit like you, and it's absolutely borderless. And it can be used for good as much as, and I think the figures say it's used more for good than it is for bad. And part of that is its borderless nature.
While at the same time, I believe the fundamental principles of democracies should still apply, where the asset or the organization, the project, should belong ultimately to the people working on it, contributing to it. And then they should be able to elect certain, whatever, like we call them sub-DAOs, or certain groups of people who take over specific responsibilities or have domain expertise to help them do that. But they should be under surveillance and oversight to serve the people who own it, just like in a democracy, in a country.
So Nicolas, let me jump here, because you mentioned DAOs, which obviously are one of the most well-known decentralized infrastructure for governance. Why they don't really work well? What is missing?
I mean, one of the things, there are a couple of reasons. One of the reasons that many DAOs struggle is that there is a concept that everybody who's part of that DAO should be able to vote on every aspect of the DAO, which is like a very, very direct form of democracy. We, however, know that the wisdom of the crowd, if you will, only works for certain kind of decisions, and for everything that requires some kind of domain expertise, it doesn't work very well at all. So this idea that you have the people in a DAO equally vote on is the money going to be used for, how is marketing going to be done, like all of these kind of things, that leaves us with very, very slow organizations, and more often than not, organizations that end up in big shouting matches, where the one who has the loudest voice eventually wins in one way or the other. So that's why I believe we do need also in decentralized organizations, governance mechanisms that enable us to elect or appoint forums of decision making where we can include and introduce oversight mechanisms, just like we do in nation states. Only that in a really decentralized organization that is not residing in any jurisdiction.
Yeah, so just quickly, can you just give us just a quick snapshot of how Q works? Because that would be a model that you and the team have developed a Q as a potential solution to secure decentralized governance. So without going too much into details, tell us how you are actually making sure that those aspects of decentralization, supervision, accountability, expertise, and independency, they are all taken into account.
Yeah. So let me just give you one concrete example to explain the principles. Let's say you are a DAO, you have a treasury, and you want to include certain rules applying to those that spend the treasury. So you can either have everybody decide upon that. That's very difficult if you only have token voting, because then you can only decide yes or no. And then, like, we want to decentralize science. We want to support certain kinds of science projects.
I don't want to touch on anything too political, but almost like a yes/no referendum.
Yes, and those are very limited. Sometimes these more operation. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And then in organizations or more organizational, like day-to-day decisions, require some kind of interpretation. It's like we're buying cars. What kind of cars? Like we're supporting some kind of science project. What kind? Is that good? What is good anyways? You in order to decide good, you got to define bad. So you will always have to have a sort of we call it scope of discretion, a set of rules defining how you want to live your life or how you want to play in an organization. And we provide not only the infrastructure to set those rules in code and or human language, but especially we provide an enforcement mechanism that's like credibly neutral and credibly fair, like a referee. We look at your rules, and then we enforce those rules and make sure that voting stays within these rules as an external governance security anchor. And then there's a dispute resolution mechanism. At the moment, it's the ICC, and we will include Claire's courts as another. So there's that's a third element of governance: rule setting, enforcement, dispute resolution.
So if I get this right, what you're saying is that you take blockchain, you create the best of smart coins that you can, the best of the automatic triggering, but then you add what you might call in trading terms a discretionary overlay. You add the overlay or the ultimate decision of human experience and the idea of what human need is and so on. And then for disagreements, you in effect have common law to decide.
Private arbitration. Yeah. So exactly. Yeah. So it's enforcement of rules, subjective rules. So you can write down the rules that you want. We can enforce those, and then there's an oversight mechanism. At the moment, using private arbitration, it's kind of borrowed. The concept is borrowed from things like international trade that is independent of jurisdictions. The U.S. dealing with the Chinese, they can very well agree on the terms of the trade. Much harder to agree on where to beef out their disputes, or maritime law. The same thing. It's private law, essentially. People agree either on a specific kind of law, which for network states sets rules, or private contracts for more types of like business dealings.
And you join if you want to. You're not forced to join. You're not bound by any sort of territory or jurisdiction. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm forced to vote in England and Wales because, it's a great privilege to have the vote, but I can't go to America. We're talking about a choice to join something which is borderless, that makes its own rules, and then has that, I think you said subjective rules, but I wonder if perhaps they're more objective, and then it's the interpretation which is subjective. So yes, again, it draws on the concept of interpretation of the rules by those who have skill in that area, and then sort of the common law idea comes back in.
And one of the reasons we've started doing that is because we, as I said, like on the one hand, we saw very early on in the space that as soon as you have decisions that require some kind of interpretation that are not just binary, if you try to do this on code alone, this leads to centralization. Simple things, code upgrades, or like the really early governance situations like the original Ethereum DAO hack or the hash or block size wars, these kind of things. Those were all social consensus, which is whoever shouts the loudest eventually wins more often than not.
So let me just jump in and before, because I know what Nick is going to say, but I want you actually, Claire, for you to kind of see what you think. Right. Obviously, blockchain is adding lots of great points about fairness, transparency, accountability. Those are all great elements that actually blockchain is bringing to different kind of industry and structure. But question, is really possible to code everything, especially when it comes down to society and also the government process?
No, I don't think it is possible to code everything. I think that blockchain, where it's safe from attack and it therefore remains an immutable ledger. And I don't think that's a given that it's always going to be like that. I don't know if you saw recently in the news, there was those two brothers from MIT, and obviously it was naughty of them. They managed to get into blockchain and sort of uncode it and sort of siphon out some assets. It's criminal, but you can't help sort of slightly admiring their brains, wishing if they'd been put to sort of just not nefarious activities, what they would have done. But yes, I think it's hugely useful for things like that. Trading, a lot of my time as a lawyer is spent looking at derivative transactions, which sometimes include crypto, sometimes don't. But you look there at where the asset passes, where the risk passes, what the balance in many different ways of the two counterparties are, and the other counterparties further on in the trade. Now, to be able to have transparency and de-risking in that I think is great. Likewise, being able to take the sort of the 1925 Law of Property Act and be able to get the land registry centralized, that may actually help then deal with any issues there. And so, yes, all of that is great. Where I don't think that blockchain can be of a primary use, but it could be secondary or tertiary use, is in anything which is more to do with sort of the human experience and more to do with not just the value of democracy, but how democracy is used in action. I think it's to misquote Churchill, something along the lines of the system that we have isn't perfect, but it's the best we've got. And I think that to turn something like that into something which is purely binary isn't always the best thing. I think blockchain could be used in democracy to cut down on voter fraud. It's a very good tool, but it's not a master.
Yeah, I mean that I was just going to say exactly the same. It's blockchain is just a tool. It's just a means to an end. It's able to help make systems more robust, become independent of bad actors, and create transparency and all of these kind of things, but it's impossible. And the reason is very simple. Even if you look into rather simple transactions like escrow, I'm putting something into escrow and then I design certain conditions under which then these assets should be paid back or paid to somebody else. If you've ever dealt with escrows, it's very difficult to define those conditions entirely. And it's actually a Nobel Prize has been given to a guy called Hart, and for the incomplete contracts theorem. So it's the idea that every contract will always be incomplete because it's impossible to foresee all future stages of the world. And that's simply the reasons why.
All future stages of business.
Yeah, exactly.
Drafting contracts is great, but you're not always going to.
There's too many variables and too many
and I think
things.
I think that's the beauty of common law. I think here in the UK we have a huge advantage, but because we live in a common law jurisdiction. There are other real life arguments about how the cost of going to law and the time it takes. But the point is, you have the application of rules which have been put in place by those who have been elected by the majority, and then interpreted by those who are separate from the executive and the legislative, or possibly are, but should be, and apply to a particular situation that involves people and people's lives. I don't think you're ever going to get a blockchain replacing the judiciary, as an example.
No, because blockchain is a great way of it's a great governance system if you think about it. The rules are very transparent, and because they're put as code in code. The enforcement is automatic. There will never be any disputes because it's binary, yes or no. So there's no room for disputes, but it's very limiting that way too.
Could I ask a question, Nicolas? Can you foresee a time when the technology is there for blockchain to no longer be binary?
So blockchain, because it's code, so that there might be other inputs, and the combination.
You take AI, you feed it into the blockchain tool.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I was actually, there were a few threads on Twitter talking about that, and some developers in the block space, they were exactly saying how early and how too early actually we are for AI to be incorporated into blockchain. Maybe we can talk about blockchain for AI, for data provenance and stuff like that.
I suppose AI can provide the information to help a binary decision. So, for example, I was listening to a podcast the other day about AI helping Ukrainian drones work out where the enemy will be and therefore whether they should go. But so that's the gathering of information, and it could feed in, but the blockchain or the human has to make the final binary yes or no.
Yeah. So different technologies. So blockchain, and at least as it is today, and as we can foresee it, will always be like a if this then that binary, like code software. AI is trying to create information that humans would normally create in a much more efficient and maybe much more complex way, or maybe much less biased way, because humans are always biased in their decision making. And if AI, and it's such a broad topic, but AI could be able to work much faster than humans, much less biased, unless you train it in a certain way, and that's a tricky bit. That's really the tricky bit. And that's why I believe we have to turn around the perspective. Blockchain, I believe, will be a great governance framework for AI.
Exactly.
Because not AI will make blockchain better, but
the two can work together.
Yeah. I think there are usually two aspects, the two discussions that I have seen out there. One is exactly what you said, Nicola, blockchain for AI, great data provenance, traceability, but less bias. AI for blockchain, it seems that we are just very early. And there were some Bitcoin developers say how difficult that can actually be to be implemented. But, obviously I'm not the expert. But I thought your point, Claire, was very interesting. Could we get to a time where blockchain is not going to be binary? And you, Nicolas, are saying that's not going to be possible anytime soon.
No. And that's going to maybe be another kind of technology that we don't know today.
Yeah. It's the nature of blockchain that it's...
Yeah, I think we will see like AI combined with blockchain technology, or like decentralized ledger technologies, or whatever way in code, AI will act as a great input for things that cannot be coded or are hard to code. And
an objective input.
Yeah.
Which is slightly contradictory, but...
I think the other way around, blockchain being a great governance tool and mechanism for AI, because if you think about it, like AI today is very centralized, which I believe is very dangerous. And if we do believe that there is a need for a decentralized AI, then still will have to be a framework to be defined within which the AI can play freely and then develop. We will have to have a mechanism to change that framework or scope of discretion of the AI, because the AI will evolve over time. And then we will have to have, in my view, an ultimate human backstop if things go wrong, because otherwise what we're saying, we're just letting the genie out of the box and then hope it will like us. So, I'm not so sure about that.
Where do you find that human backstop? What's the best way for all people? And I would go back to, it's that combination of democracy, rule of law, separation of the judiciary, and the human interpretation of facts against the law.
Absolutely. But for a decentralized AI, we would have to find a way to do this in a decentralized manner, where today all of the things that you described are just available in a nation state jurisdiction, which by its definition is more centralized than systems we see today.
Which I don't think either of us is saying you should throw out. It certainly has its place.
Yes.
But it's also something that can be built upon. Yeah.
I just want to thank you, both of you, for coming on the show. I think there is just so much to unravel. And actually, those are the points that, many people out there should think about more, rather than just, the financial aspect of, crypto or digital assets. There are actually some really deep implications for humanity and for the way that we govern ourselves and live. So definitely more and more that we can... Exactly. What's the point of it? What's the point? So, we'd love to have you back on the show, and maybe we can also get our viewers some feedback, what they want, maybe us to reflect a little bit on and do some more thoughtful discussion. I think is really needed in the space. So, thank you so much, Nicola. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you.
It was blessed. Thank you very much.